Welcome to Six Count. I'm your host, Sarah Wild, bringing you the voices and stories of jazz from Durham, North Carolina. Well, hello, and thank you so much for joining Six Count today. Brad, we're here in Chapel Hill, and just so nice to have you in town.
Nice to be here, as always.
And we also have Peter Burke, who is a local jazz blogger, and so we're very excited to have you with us here as well, Peter.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here in Carborough while your host is in Chapel Hill.
Yes, we are in Carborough, which even though it is about 200 feet away from Chapel Hill, we technically are outside the Gray Squirrel. But Peter, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, what I know, Brad, could be summarized by local boy makes good in Washington, D.C. jazz scene and defies the stereotype by coming back to his local area to be a local musician frequently. Why does he break that stereotype?
Well, I come back because my parents still live in Elon, and I grew up there and then lived in Chapel Hill before I moved to D.C. area. I went to Elon University. I was the last graduating class of Elon College, and then I did 3 years at UNC studying jazz with Jim Ketch and Ed Palantonio. And then I was working at the Borders Books and Music Store on the 15501. So a lot of ties to this area, and I think I left Chapel Hill to get my master's in jazz and saxophone performance, mostly so that I could work my way back and contribute to this community the way that I was inspired by Jim Ketch and Craig Whitaker and all the Jan Metzger, all the people that I studied jazz with and heard from an early age.
Well, so good to have you here. Will you share about your performance tonight at The Cave with Danny Gruen?
Oh, sure. I've been very fortunate to play The Cave, every couple of months with Danny. Danny's a good friend and a fantastic trombonist, and we've been working there since April of last year, maybe 2 years now, can't remember, with Casey Toll and TJ Mayani. And tonight, it's kind of another stereotype breaking moment. I'm playing some very straight ahead music with them, the music of Lucky Thompson, and the stuff he recorded in the 50s with Oscar Pettiford and Jimmy Cleveland. And for no other reason than I had this music sitting on the shelf and I'd never taken the time to really dive into it. And I bought a new soprano recently, and I thought, well, I'd like to. Lucky was known as a soprano player. With a different kind of approach than John Coltrane or Wayne Shorter or Sidney Bechet or Steve Lacy. And I said, well, maybe I'll just see what that sounds like on this new horn.
And different in what way?
Well, I think he wasn't an avant-gardist like Steve Lacy, and he wasn't a swing-style musician, early jazz musician like Sidney Bechet, and he wasn't playing with such an original concept as Coltrane, and he wasn't as post-bop as Wayne Shorter, but he just had a really lyrical and sincere delivery on the smaller horn.
Yeah, I think of Lucky Thompson with bebop, and I was thinking I can't think of any bebop soprano players.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he might, and he only added it later in his career, but yeah, just kind of a different voice on that horn. And not that I'm going to imitate Lucky at all or anything like that, but just getting in the spirit of his really great tunes that he wrote, beautiful lines, familiar sounding tunes, even though you probably never heard them before.
And how do you negotiate taking and drawing inspiration from someone you're paying tribute to and also preserving your voice?
Oh, well, I don't have a broad spectrum of sounds in my personal voice, so I just try to. Well, first of all, I pick artists that are close to my range. So I come out of the bebop and cool school. Lee Konitz was my mentor and hero, so having that history there. But I also am a dyed-in-the-wool avant-gardist, maybe not exploring that this evening, but so I try to pick projects or composers or improvisers that speak to me in some way that, some kind of tether to my own lineage. So Lucky fits in there, being a fan of Lester Young or of Don Byas and those early transitional beboppers, Charlie Parker. All my favorite tenor players are alto players. I love Charlie Parker on tenor. I love Lee Konitz when he plays tenor. I love Ornette Coleman when he plays tenor. So a lot of times, that's and I've been playing mostly alto for the last couple of years. So this is another chance to, see what I've lost.
Well, you also mentioned Jim Ketch, who is known for historic jazz swing music, and so that didn't take. So I'm curious where the avant-garde stuff came in for you, and also do you still like some of those, the roots of the music?
Oh, sure. Jim's North Carolina Jazz Repertory Orchestra was probably one of the first big bands I heard live when I was a teen. And, I went to all their concerts, and I was very inspired. I lead my own big 17-piece big band in Washington, D.C., the Bohemian Caverns Jazz Orchestra. But before that, I led a repertory ensemble that was directly inspired by Jim, but it was a chamber ensemble, and we were doing The Birth of the Cool, and then we expanded to the Thelonious Monk Tentet at Town Hall. And so, again, the common thread was the instrumentation with tuba and French horn, and I realized that I like a little less frantic delivery of, bebop melodies. So cool jazz was completely honest, and Jim, obviously touched on that when I studied with him and when I hung out and when I play with him. But the avant-garde came from Lee Konitz. He would play the Great American Songbook, but he would try to make it sound unfamiliar. He once said he wanted his free tunes to sound like standards and his standards to sound like free tunes, and I totally agree with that. And I got to take a 4-hour lesson with Ornette Coleman. Again, me just kind of chasing the history of the music, wanting to go to the source. And I found out, when I went to Banff, the International Jazz and Creative Music Workshop, that opened my ears in another way that said, well, wait, if I'm just playing by ear in a free context, I really have to be hearing what I'm playing instead of just running the changes or threading the needle or whatever you want to call it in bebop. So that really helped my ears working with this pianist named Erica Dohe. We played completely free improvisations. And so I really took to that. But, not trying to play it in a, angry or abstract fashion, more or less just, again, trying to find beautiful, melodies in the abstract.
So, Brad, as someone who sort of feels like going to an abstract museum when I listen to avant-garde jazz, I struggle to find it accessible. And I don't want to be a dumb listener. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who really wants to understand or appreciate and get into it.
It's not for everyone. And when I was in jazz kindergarten or whatever you want to call it, I didn't gravitate towards it. I found it annoying or pointless or something like that. But when I really felt like, and the visual art is the good analogy. It's more about the process than the product, and that's what I love about improvising and playing this music is that we get to recreate it every time, and it's not a permanent artifact. Recordings are just captured concerts, right? And we recreate. I think the advent of the recording really was detrimental because now you go to hear somebody play Cottontail and everyone, even Ben Webster himself, had to play that same solo to excite or not let down the fans. But I think prior to that, it was new every night. And when I play in my big band, I find myself playing, I play baritone sax in the big band, and I find myself playing the same things over the same chords sometimes, and it's because I'm hearing the same framework. So if I hear the same backgrounds, the same tempo, the same chart every time, it's going to influence, or I'll hear the same ideas maybe. Or maybe, again, that could be my limitation. But I find in the more open-ended things that I can create with the people that I'm creating with, and that's different every time. Another great Lee Konitz quote is they said, to him in the 90s. They said, when he was being more abstract and freer with his song standards, they said, why don't you sound like you did when you were Stan Kenton? And he said, well, because I'm not playing with Stan Kenton. And it's that idea of living in the moment with the people you're living and playing with, and really improvising and really reacting and being present. And that's a life lesson in itself. But so that's the thing I like about the avant-garde. But I try to apply that same freewheeling attitude to playing Lucky Thompson, Gigi Grice. What else have I done? Sun Ra.
You did Ornette Coleman. Right. And the thing is that is there any rehearsal? No, as usual. No rehearsal. No. I hire the musicians I trust, and they trust me that I'll be prepared and that the product will be worth it. I think, you said I catch and release or whatever. And but there's some joy I have in doing that work. I know Matt Wilson called me an impresario or something like that, and I thought, well, that sounds fancy, but really it's just because, I could not do it, but then it wouldn't get done. And and in terms of repertoire, this is the history. It's just this is my studying. This is my tribute to the Black American heroes that I grew up listening to on record. And I used to kind of shirk my responsibility of being a new musician and writing my own music. But you're going to write a better melody than George Gershwin or Duke Ellington. You're going to play a better solo than Lester Young. That's silly. So I do write my own music. I have a 12-tone sports-themed avant-garde ballad band, and we're very. Can
you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, I started a band. I was going through a personal crisis in 2014. I had all these gigs lined up, and I didn't want to catch. I didn't want to program. I didn't want to write, and so I just hired my friends, my best friends. And I said, okay, we're going to do this gig, and I'm just going to print out a bunch of those X's and O's football plays. And I said, we'll just improvise graphic scores, and I'll say, this is called Dick Butkus, or this is called William the Refrigerator Perry, or this is called the 40-yard. We were going to kind of BS the entire gig, and we did that. And then we said, wait a minute, we're on to something. So the next gig, we all wrote 12-tone tunes for the gig, serialism, and we always ended with a ballad that Thelonious Monk played solo piano, his stride style, but we played just the melody, just once or maybe twice, no improvisation, because a good melody doesn't care who plays it, right? So we did that, and we did a football album called Draft. The tunes weren't even finished yet, that's why we called it Draft. And then we followed up with a All-American album, which was baseball themed. And then we said, let's keep going. So then we did a bowling album called Smells Like Teen Spirit. And then we did our fourth album was called Four. It was a golf album, just the four of us. Sometimes it's a quintet. And then we did another album called Just the Tip, which was a swinging album of billiards. To tip is to swing in jazz. You're tipping. I like puns too. And then we just did a seventh album? I've lost track. Oh, we had a fifth album that's all solo sports during COVID. We haven't finished it yet. And then we did a seventh album, which is Croquet, and it's actually all ballads.
Now I've heard some of those albums. How did I know they were 12-tone?
Oh, you would just from the liner notes.
Okay,
unless you want to count the pitches. You play every 12, all 12 notes of the chromatic scale in the order that we prescribe, and then you start over after you've exhausted that 12 order. But we disguise it very well.
So that means I need to listen more carefully then.
If you've heard the album, then you're one of 5 listeners. It's the band and Peter. Kidding.
Do you have any names and email links for those people?
I have 25 records I released on my Bandcamp page. What is it? bradlinde.bandcamp.com. We're talking about how esoteric I might be, but they're all on there for listening or purchase.
How long do you sleep each night?
I have a day job. I teach I have a really great program at Georgetown Day School in Washington, D.C. So I'm a high school, I won't say band director because I just teach jazz and creative music to 74 students spread across 5 ensembles. But I get a good bit of sleep. Good. 5 hours, 6 hours.
That's about 3 or 4 hours less than would be ideal for me.
You've been talking about 25 recordings. You've been talking about you can't even keep track of your sports themed things. And again, if you look at his calendar, he doesn't just stay in Washington, D.C. or down here in Chapel, Carver, or Durham. He goes lots of other places, and your energy level is just incredible.
Well, it is changing. As I get older, I'm realizing that, I used to think getting older was a byproduct of like getting married, having kids, having a 9 to 5, burning the candle at both ends. Now it feels more like it's just age, just the body starting to break down. But I don't drink or smoke or use drugs, so I feel like that helps. I have my only vice is donuts. I love donuts. I live next to a very great bakery in Washington, D.C., Bread First.
Is it Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' for you?
Well, Krispy Kreme, and not just because I'm a North Carolina kid, just that. Yes, right. Yeah, no, I think they're superior donuts.
And I wanted to ask also about just the DC jazz scene post-pandemic and how it has revitalized itself or not. What kind of changes have you seen?
Well, the pandemic was hard. We lost a bunch of great spaces for jazz music. Twins Jazz Club was a local spot on U Street that really supported, local artists and traveling artists. And a lot of the restaurants and performance spaces where people would play steady gigs disappeared. More have come up. But really, kind of a steady decline. 2016, Bohemian Caverns closed, and that was a huge loss for a lot of different communities in the jazz world.
And also the venue for where you had your orchestra as well?
That was Bohemian Caverns, yeah. That had been there since 1926. And it closed after the riots of 68 and opened back up in different incarnations. But my band was there from April of 2010 till the day it closed in March 2016, and so that's gone. But we have the Kennedy Center, we have Strathmore in Maryland, we have several restaurants and everything that we can that people can access. We have a great avant-garde space in Tacoma Park called Rhizome. It's a house that has art upstairs, and they present almost nightly all kinds of different really great shows. So I do a lot of my work there, and we have presenting bodies, and sometimes the museums, Smithsonian's, Phillips Collection will have music, jazz music, and I try to do my part at Georgetown Day School. Back to my days working for the Atlas Performing Arts Center, curating their jazz series, and they're still doing some of that. But I like to bring the artists I respect and admire down and present them at the high school. We just had Sarah Serpa there for our social justice teaching days, and she presented her recognition project about Portugal's occupation of Africa, and with her video and narration, and then Erica Dohe and I accompanied her, and so that was a great chance for the public and the student body to hear something completely different and very relevant.
And how do you, I guess in an ideal world, would you do a lot more performance settings for listening rooms or like the Kennedy Center, gigs at bars? What's your preference?
I like to have a captive audience because sometimes the music is very challenging, and I like to explain what's happening. I think that's a way to bridge the gap for the avant-gardists, the new avant-garde listener. I like to do that, and I think it's hard in a bar setting. Also, my music isn't often it's not entertainment. I'm not saying it's thought-provoking, but I'm saying it's definitely themed, and I feel like a theme helps us zero in on a concept or something and maybe helps explain the music to a casual listener.
Yeah, I suspect tonight, for example, at the Cave, Brad's been very good about explaining some of the tunes that he's playing and some of the history behind it, and so people understand where it's coming from or where it stands in some artist's career, and I find that very useful.
And I will say the Cave, to be an old dive bar in Chapel Hill, it's a captive audience. Like when I did the Sun Ra show, we had a projection on the wall. People were sitting down on the floor in the bar area, listening. I mean, it wasn't like they just came to drink and there happened to be a 10-piece band playing space jazz. And
is it easy to do the banter in between? And it sounds like you use that as an educational moment.
Yeah, years ago, a colleague of mine said, Brad, they don't want to be educated, they want to be entertained. And I said, well, we can do both. And I just feel impelled to explain what's going on, especially if it's something they might scratch their head to and say, why is this here? the banter is very easy for me. It's just another way of improvising. I don't get. I was telling my students, they were saying, "How do you get over stage fright?" I said, "I don't know. Never had it. That's not that big of a deal. Like living is hard. Like
you're just talking to people,
right? Yeah,
that's all you're doing."
Do you think jazz is meant to be a challenging genre?
I don't think it is meant to be. I think it can be. But it also depends on, where you're coming from. I played drums in like a Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Weezer cover band when I was in high school, because I didn't know anything about chords, and all my friends were starting a band. I was like, well, I'll just hit stuff, and so, jazz to me was a reprieve from the loudness and the amplifiers. I prefer acoustic music. I don't like using microphones. I don't like having to play in a certain cheesemo way, if you will. I don't know if that's a weird way of putting it, but I want it to be more like a conversation across the table rather than a bunch of people yelling at the same time, like a sporting event or something. So I'm saying, yes, some of it is challenging, some of it is takes some explanation, but ultimately it's just letting the audience decide. I always told the DC Jazz Festival, if you're going to present Snarky Puppy, you've got to present the other part of that. Where's Wadada Leo Smith? Where's Henry Threadgill? Where's the avant-garde? You're saying, oh, we need to have variety, but sometimes you're only looking at one side of the variety.
Mm-hmm. The easiest side to look at because it's closest rather than far away. Yeah.
If you were to disappear to a island far away and no one could get in contact with you, what is some wisdom you would impart to your students, and that would be the last thing they heard from Brad Linde?
Number one thing that I say is that you have to make the scene. Not only show up to the gigs and create the community or whatever, but you have to literally create the scene that you want to be in. So that's what I did. I got to DC. I started doing the things I wanted to do. And one of my good friends and one of my heroes, he goes, you just came out of nowhere and just started doing it. You didn't ask anybody's permission. I said, well, who am I going to ask? I'm not worried about you all. I'm worried about Charlie Parker. I'm worried about my heroes on the records. That's the standard. I said, I'm just going to do what I do. And so that's one thing. You have to literally make the scene. And I tell the kids, if they want to be interesting, to be interested in something. So find something that they're really passionate about and sincere and follow that. I don't want to be a utility musician that is putting on a face and playing jazz musician and playing rock musician. I don't do wedding bands. I'm going to show, I want people to hire me or come to hear me, even though I'm doing all these repertory things. I'm known for that, but I don't, if I had a teacher who once tell me, oh, you can't sound like that on this tune. You have to end on a high A, and he would show me the fingering on the saxophone. I said, well, I don't want to. He said, no, you can't be Lester Young or Dexter Gordon. He goes, you got to sound like Michael Brecker. And I said, I don't like Michael Brecker. I don't even listen to Michael Brecker. So this idea that jazz music has to be everything in the kitchen sink, you wouldn't go hear a mariachi band and go, they didn't play any waltzes tonight. Or you wouldn't go to an R&B concert and say, well, they didn't do any bossa novas. It's like, so this idea that jazz, treating it like a cocktail hour and checking off the list. Oh, we played a blues, we played a standard, we played a ballad, we played a bossa nova. That's insincere. When I go to hear Charlie Hayden play, he plays his music. When I go to hear, when I went to hear Paul Motion play, his whole set had a unity to it that was him. And it wasn't about kowtowing to audience expectations. And no other music do we expect that. Nirvana didn't swing one on the muddy banks of the Wiscaw. It's that. So those are a couple of things I always say to the kids. Those are two of the most important ones. I think, and just work hard, be nice. There's a long line of people that can play, and really what you want to be is a good person first. Yeah.
I appreciate your reverence to the heroes at the expense, perhaps, of just a listener who is not as informed or wants something that you don't want to do. And I appreciate how you can stick to things that are important to you.
Well, first of all, we're not making money in this, so it's all vanity and love, right? And the other thing is that, especially with like streaming and Spotify, like tonight we're doing all Lucky Thompson. It's like a concept album, which I don't know that people really dig into anymore. But it's not gonna be like you're changing the radio dial every song, and I don't seek out that kind of music, in my own listening. So it's lovely to be able to say take it or leave it. But again, I hope that more people leave with saying I should check out a Sun Ra record, or I should check out Lucky Thompson record, or who is Lee Konitz, or who is Allison Miller, or who is, Sarah Serpa. I think that's, with YouTube, my kids will go on and say, I watched a video and this guy plays the last, like, that guy lives in his mother's basement in Iowa. Why aren't you listening to Jimmy Cleveland or J.J. Johnson? There's no gatekeeper. So there's all kinds of content, but no quality control. So that's an obstacle too.
And where can people find you on a typical week, if that is a thing, in DC?
Yeah, I don't frequent the jam sessions in DC or have a steady restaurant gig. But every week at the Little Beast Bistro on Connecticut Avenue, a fellow UNC graduate, he's a pianist, John Howard. He teaches at the Burke School. We're colleagues in the private school system. He leads a trio there from 6 to 8, and I go sit in with him, and some of my students come. And so that's where I am regularly. And then whenever I could put a show together for my big band, I have a website, and I Instagram a lot. So that's where they can find me, on the internet.
And Peter, thank you so much for co-hosting this episode with me, our first one together. So very exciting. Anything you'd like to share from your perspective covering local jazz as well, and anything else for Brad?
I'm looking backwards, actually. I heard George Garzone last night at Sharp 9, and I'd never heard George Garzone before, and it was an amazing performance. In between sets, Ernest Turner and I were talking, and he said some players play just kind of straight lines, and George does not. And he can play fast, and you will, instead of everything blurring together, there are all sorts of diversions and inflections and colors in that I hadn't heard before. And there was a jammed audience, about 10% of which were wreath players. And it was just marvelous. But no, I'd check out Brad's website, because then you can find out not only where he's playing up there, but then where he's playing down here.
And Brad, will you share where readers can find about your work?
Oh, locavorejazz.weebly.com, though it's simplest to just Google Locavore Jazz, because there is no other.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been wonderful chatting with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Six Count. I'm Zara Wild. You can let us know what you thought of the episode or recommend a guest by emailing us at sixcountpodcast@gmail.com or by finding us on Twitter or Instagram at sixcountpodcast. If you'd like to support our work in telling the story of jazz in Durham, you can make a gift to the show by following the link in our episode description. Thanks for listening.